All right, starting a little bit early today. Just opening up the festival doors so that the ceremony can begin. We're going to have Dr. Hans Utter. We're going to clarify. I think it's Utter. And he's going to be on with us today in about 6 minutes or so. I just thought I'd open things up a little bit early today. Hey, how about that? It's a rare day when I'm actually early. So let's all celebrate being early. And I hope you're all doing pretty well. I got to fix my collar too. I am definitely rocking the Megalodon right there. This is the new totem. You can see it, courtesy of CC Jones, aka Fran. And I just got this yesterday. Lady Artemis put it together with Mr. Artemis. So that was pretty cool. And thank you again, Fran, for this wonderful Megalodon tooth. And Fran used to be an intense deep water diver. And she actually dove into, I think it was a deep river, and she found this tooth, brought it up to the surface. And there's more to the story, but let's bring our guest in. Let's bring Hans in here. He's a little early too, so let's make use of our time together. I think we're just clicking through here, waiting to see. Let's see. All right, do a little video prompt here. Let's bring the good doctor on.
Hey, how are you?
Good, Hans. How are you doing today?
Good, man. Yep, trying to finish up this album, and it's almost done. It's a little bit challenging, but it was cool. So, hey.
So I was on your website, and it looks like, are you a sarod player?
Oh, no, sitar.
Yeah, so you're a sitar player. Okay.
Yeah, I do. I have this whole studio I built. It's finally up and operational, so it's pretty. That was like the first thing I did. That was a guitar, playing like Indian classical music on guitar. But I've done a lot of different genres. I play sitar's primary thing.
Right.
And then guitar. I play also like R&B, funk. I'm playing touring groups and stuff like that. Other things I don't really do now anymore, but I play pretty much any style of music you can think of, and and that's what I've been doing now for now it's a long time. It's about 8 years full time. I was actually university stuff, and then got back into doing music and still standing. So here we go.
Well, it's great to have you on the show. I watched your latest episode with Jan Irvin. Mm-hmm. And so I thought it's really fertile, and there's a lot to talk about just from that episode alone, from Apocalypto to the scene behind me, which is Altamont, to a number of other things that probably tie into your schizogenesis concept and theory, which we will talk about. So I'm really excited to have you on today, and wanted to find out a little bit more about you. Where are you located?
I'm in Columbus, Ohio.
And where did you study the sitar? Was it Ali Akbar concert?
No. I left when I was 22. I left the United States, and it was this random thing, kind of, and I moved to India. I lived in India pretty much hardcore. I guess it got disowned from my family, so I couldn't. So I would just come back and like work a bunch of jobs over the summer and go back to India. So I lived in India about 4 or 5 years. But it was great at the time. I don't think I'm that hardcore now, man. I probably couldn't do it, but yeah. So I learned in India Ustad Sujat Khan, and then I've continued, I've been back to India many times, mm-hmm. Research and stuff. But yeah, those sitars. Yeah, I went. Sujat Khan is son of Vlad Khan, one of the top sitarists. I've been doing guitar, various styles from, I was playing gig, probably 15 on 15, and but then I had an academic, still have an academic sort of part of myself. So I was in for about a decade or so. I was involved in that.
So what was your background in academia? Was it music or something else?
Well, I decided to go get my degree because I had dropped out of college to go to India. Mm-hmm. And so I decided to, I got my undergrad, then I was just doing a lot of gigs, playing, all these late night gigs. I was pretty much doing gigs full time. And I just, that's on this. It's just a sitar thing. But so this is primarily, like, I have not done much of my website. This is primarily just, I was like a sitar promotional thing. And I have mm-hmm. not, I really have to update it. But I still, I'm doing various things, both with performing. And so I had academic stuff. I had a pretty big publication come out from, it was Routledge, so I had to do like a scientific paper and stuff. So.
Oh wow, that's that's pretty significant. Good for you. So we're looking at some of your accomplishments here: performance regularly in the U.S., India, Europe. Recipient of 16 national and international awards and grants, including Louis Armstrong Outstanding Musician Award, and was recently appointed as an Ohio Arts Council Artist in Resident. As a band leader, projects include Mood Swing, MLQ, Utter Space, and Hans Utter Trio.
Okay, some of those things are kind of
old.
Yeah, I mean, I really got to update this thing, man. I've got like Jimi Hendrix and Philosophy that came out 2018. Mm-hmm. I got a new book. We have time. I can grab a copy of it. Are we about to go live or?
We are. We're streaming, man.
We're streaming. Shit, this is a show. I had no idea,
on, brother.
Oh man, this is like totally like this is like shop talk or something.
It's all good. It's all good. Yeah.
So it started. So with this audience, man, I feel like I'm in front of this crowd. This roaring crowd about ready to play with Mick Jagger.
That's right, man. This is actually from the Jefferson Airplanes set.
Okay.
Where Marty Ballin gets clocked by one of the Angels with a pool cue and gets knocked out.
Yeah.
So Santana was supposed to play that day, and there's a clip from the movie where Michael Shreve, who's the drummer of Santana, is talking to somebody. I forget. I think it might have been Bob Weir, and he said, "Yeah, man, yeah, they knocked Marty out. They knocked Marty out, dude. We're not going on." So Santana, who was supposed to play, didn't play that day. So tell me about your new book. What's the new book?
Well, the book I have available, it's called Awaken Radiance of Mind, the True Palace of Freedom. So it's kind of a long title, but it just goes through a lot of sort of different material people may not be familiar with, and then it goes also into the higher dimensional aspect of music as it connects to the manifestation of the physical world we live in, the manifestation of our minds, the inner space. But there's a lot of stuff in there. I think it's everyone that's read it really likes it. I may add to it, but there's a lot of stuff. I guess it's sort of, I'd say it's more conspiracy oriented than not. So it's not quite. The title sounds almost like some epical spiritual tone, but I think it's relatively interesting, and so that's there. And I've got a number of other books, and I have to get around to doing that. In fact, now I'm inspired to do that today. So, but yeah, that's the one, and so I can grab show the copy. I have some hardcover editions of that left, but
can you do that now? Can you go grab one now?
Sure. Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead, do that. So we're having a conversation with Dr. Hans Utter, and we're going to get into Schizmogenesis and what that's all about, and then talk about some of the themes that he and Jan Irvin were batting around on Jan's show, and might be able to extrapolate and expand and make some of those bigger. I think he's been on Jan's show about 50 times. And the latest is on Unspun, which is an ongoing series that Jan does. I think it's on YouTube. It's also part of the Gnostic Media website. So, Mr. Cruz sent me the interview with Hans and Jan at the beginning of the week, and then I watched it, and then Steve came to me and said, "Hey, would you like to have Hans on the show?" I was like, "Yeah, I just watched this interview with him and Jan Irvin. I think that'd be great." So let's see that book, Hans.
Okay. Well, here's one of them. Let's see. This is Jimi Hendrix and Philosophy.
Right.
Self, and this is what is it? Open Court Press, and then this is my book. Totally, I did everything, including the cover and all that. It was a pain in the ass, but
what's the title there? What is it?
Backwards? It's just showing up backwards. Awaken Radiance of Mind.
Okay, so this is the one we're talking about.
Yeah. This is mine. Yeah.
Okay, so the Hendrix book, that looks really interesting. When did that come out?
That was 2018, I believe. That's 2018. Yep.
So give us a little synopsis on Hendrix and the philosophy of Jimi Hendrix.
Well, this series is basically it's a popular culture and philosophy series. So they go there's a whole bunch of books in this series. But this guy approached me, well, sort of random, because he used to come see me play in this bar. I would, had this gig I set up, just a kind of a dive bar, but I would just kind of do my extended kind of guitar freak out stuff. And he turns out he was a professor of philosophy, and then he mentioned this book project, and so then I got able to write a bunch of stuff for it. So there's quite a lot in there. Jimi Hendrix and philosophy. I connected with like Schopenhauer, the idea of will, an idea. With Gnostic philosophy, looking for the beloved, right? The beloved and this and that. So it's kind of a lot of different stuff. But it's pretty interesting, and I found that, at least for me, I know that I've seen a lot of the sort of darkness from many music acts that you think are really great. And there's actually, even if their music is good, I think, it can definitely may not be something you want to, permeate your brain with. But I think Hendrix, overall, was definitely sort of had a sort of higher connection, in his music. And he goes through a lot of different, kind of questions and themes. I mean, I can go into more detail, but that's
I think Hendrix is a really interesting character, and everybody, knows him for being this guitar god. But his lyrics are pretty mind blowing. And a lot of what's interesting, and you probably know this because you wrote the book, but a lot of the stuff that he talks about in some of these science fiction laced songs are actually events from his childhood that he like mythologizes. Like there's one of the songs, I think, is it Castles Made of Sand, that tune. I think that has to do with his mother, and his mother actually leaving the household. And so he's a very interesting character, and a lot of the really spacey sci-fi stuff actually has roots in his own personal life. Did you go down any of those rabbit holes?
Well, and that's there. But the thing is, for me, why I think Hendrix is more interesting in that, there's a lot of things we could talk about, our experiences in life and this and that. So even like Castles Made of Sand, right? I feel like busting out my Strat right now and playing it. I got my 75 Strat sitting there, but I'm not going to do that. I might later, but basically, like Castles Made of Sand, it's a series of vignettes, right? It's the first one down the street. You can hear her scream, "You're a disgrace," as she slams the door in his drunken face. Next outside, the neighbors start to gossip and drool. "God's old girl, you must be mad. What happened to sweet love you and me had?" Against the door he leans and starts a scene, and tears fall and burn in garden green. So that first verse, it's okay. The guy's getting thrown out of his house, but then
that's his father, right? That's Al, right?
Yeah, but what I'm saying is this: so tears fall and burn in garden green. So that color of green, this ties into like Axis bowl of love as love. So he has this sort of mystical cosmology. I'm sure a lot more intensified by LSD, right? For sure.
Sure. Yeah.
But definitely he's got this. So it's just, that's maybe a personal thing, but it begins to take on much broader significance, right? So the tears falling into the garden, that's like, this is the, like it's like the water of life, but it's also the how the whole cycle of life, when you live and you die, you become back part of the earth, but then there's this thing of like nothing in this life stays, everything doesn't linger, right? And an Indian brave whose heart was a frown, so he's ready to go, and then he dies before he can go into the war. If people don't familiar with the lyrics, I can recite them. But
yeah, no, so yeah, Hendrix is interesting in that he does create these mythologies in his music, and they're quite interesting. I think this one song in particular, the one we're talking about, is kind of a key one for him, because it's sort of the the garden or the ground, I think, on which a lot of his life experience and this kind of more cosmic mythology begins to evolve out of. The other thing I find interesting about Hendrix is that he and Bruce Lee are born on the same day.
Okay.
And they're different years. There's all these weird connections with him and Bruce Lee, right? They both are from Seattle area, right? They're both born on the same day, and they're both mixed, if I'm not mistaken. I think Bruce Lee is mixed. And they're both these kind of Sagittarian philosophers. Like Hendrix is more spacey and more sci-fi, but Bruce Lee's a total philosopher, and his whole thing is like working towards the system that's no system. And I just find both of them just, utterly fascinating.
I'm also a Sagittarian, man. Same. Yeah. I was born.
There you go. And so, and you see these links between people sometimes that they're just so uncanny, like really, really uncanny. Like Jim Morrison and Sinead O'Connor are both born on the same day, both Sagittarians, by the way. And weird links in some ways between the two of them, particularly because Sinead O'Connor is, in my estimation, she's handled, right? Sinead O'Connor is clearly MK Ultra. And one of her handlers is Chris Christopherson, which there's this weird, I don't know if you've ever seen it, but there's this weird like interview with her on a TV show in England, and she's there with Chris Christopherson. It's like, what is she doing there with Chris Christopherson? Well, Christopherson is a noted handler. He's a Rhodes Scholar, right? So he connects into the whole Laurel Canyon scene, and that's where Morrison connects into the whole Laurel Canyon. So there's these weird 6 degrees of separation between Morrison and Sinead O'Connor, both born on the same day. So yeah, man. I mean, I think I love music, and you're right. A lot of it is tainted, and it doesn't stop me from listening to it. But I think understanding some of these people and what they're about and where these scenes evolve out of, I think is important. So at least you know what you're getting into when you go back and listen to some of these bands.
Well, yeah. But I think, I'll just finish up with the Hendrix thing before I go back. So,
sure.
So in a sense, he had this sort of inner awakening, right? And so you can hear this message to love, his later songs, right? So he's seen this, the crossing the Rainbow Bridge. He has a 1983 a mermaid should be going underwater, right? Forever leaving, but there's this deep, this feeling of loss, right? Which comes, from his mother, from his childhood, and that pain is there, right? And he does transcend it, right? Angel. So he has this sort of, higher level awakening. But in a certain way, he's still a vehicle that's in this process. And the music itself, I mean, even the electrical, the guitar, and they can become almost like a sludge. I mean, it's a frequency. There's an electrical energy, electromagnetic processes, right? That are going on, with music. And that's why it's so central. Like in China, ancient China, every time the new dynasty came, they would change the tuning, and every instrument had to be tuned exactly. And the music itself would create almost the psychic texture, the invisible garden out of which society would arise, or the society, man, earth, and heaven. These 3 tiers would be integrated in a beneficial way. And so with the popular music, there's a lot of elements that are inherent in just some of the rhythms that have been incorporated, that have become tropes, right? Some other elements of even certain types of timbral effects. But then, of course, the deeper level is the sort of psycho-spiritual cleaving to your inner space, your inner mind, without you knowing it, right? The hidden inner mirror that Lacan talks about. So this is where, it's good to know and be clear, and then you can enjoy or not. But these things actually can have quite, we'll say, okay, subtle but potent, right? So it's not like, you're doing like some, bad LSD at Altamont, which would be, what an awful experience that would be, right? But it's like, these things can color you. And in fact, that's what I've looked into. I have an outline and half this book written on a broken computer, but on this music, mind control, psychobiology thing, which was something that I didn't, as I got into it, it goes on and on and on. And then you can literally see that the connection of the music is related to basically various ritual spaces that are created. And they're like, these rituals are like rituals of dislocation, of fear, of control, of whatever you want to call them, whether it's something like 9/11, or it's something like the Kennedy assassination, or something like Altamont, or something like Corona, or whatever maybe. But these things they're cycled there's like a temporal matrix, almost like this thing has been mapped out. And as they're taking the human race towards these endpoints, the music itself is really important, right? It's almost like freezing time. It's like pulling us off of this timeline. Like everywhere you go, like the classic rock. I mean, you can't escape it, right? Okay, it is classic, right? But it's almost like you can see like there's like this, like this endpoint. And then they're just recycling these models in these. I'm getting kind of abstract here, but
no, not really. No, I can follow you, and I think other people can follow you.
These ritual frames, and so that's what.
Well, Hendrix even plays a personal role in these ritual frames, right? So Jimi Hendrix really comes to everybody's conscious awareness in a big way with Monterey Pop, right? And he has this fire ritual at Monterey Pop, blows everybody away, right? So Monterey Pop is the initiation for the Summer of Love in the 60s, right? This is what happens. And then there's a lot of weird endings and beginnings. So that's the beginning of Hendrix, and really the ending of the Mamas and the Papas, like they're done, and their role was to John Phillips and what's his name, Lou Adler, their role is to actually put this thing together. So Hendrix kicks it off. And then by the time you get to Woodstock, he's doing the Star Spangled Banner. And, that's like the apotheosis of, between 67 and 69. And then Hendrix is also in Altamont, right? He's in the movie. He's not on the stage, but he's in the movie at the beginning of the film.
I did not. Oh, you know what? I didn't remember that. I mean, Mick's watching, the first Snuff film, watching the.
Jimi Hendrix is in the movie.
Where?
It's at the beginning. It's right at the beginning. He's connecting with, I think, Mick and Keith right at the beginning.
Oh, yeah, I remember. Yeah, in like the dressing room. Yeah, and they're like, right. Yeah. They're like, oh, Mick, all right, bloke, just put your, yeah. It's you're right. I totally forgot that. Thanks.
That's right. So he's in the film, Gimme Shelter. And then I think his last, if I'm not mistaken, public performance and festival was Isle of Wight.
Isle of Wight. Yeah.
Which is a kind of like the English version of Altamont. Mm-hmm. Like it gets really scary, very dark. And the other person who emerges in Isle of Wight is Leonard Cohen, who puts the entire audience in a trance. Like he completely NLPs the entire audience. Mm-hmm. So, and that's like, in a lot of ways, that's sort of like, this weird bookend with Altamont, I mean, mm-hmm. Obviously Hendrix goes on from Altamont, I think, to do Isle of Wight, and then that's it. He's done. But he's this guy that comes in, he initiates that cycle with the fire ritual at Monterey Pop. And then he's in, I think, the last big festival, Isle of Wight, which is, again, a total nightmare. So he's this pivotal figure in this thing you're talking about.
Well, and that's why, in a certain way, like he's kind of a wild card, because this, and I got into this like very deeply with all the, and like I said, this computer, the hard drive died. I had all my research on that. It's not the hard drive didn't die, but the computer died. But there's so much connection with these dates. You look at the date of the Kennedy assassination. You look at the date of Charles Manson. These a certain number of days in between, and so there's a lot of those in parallels. So we go back to the end of the 1950s, right? So you have this new music that has just arisen, that was, yes, it had antecedents and blues. You have the jump. It comes from the jump R&B thing, but it died. It hit a brick wall, with the whole plane crash and Buddy Holly, etc.
Buddy Holly, the day the music died.
But all of them got shut down. What's Gene Vincent got killed in a car accident in England,
Didn't Eddie Cochran die not long after that too?
Yeah, and then other guys got busted for perving out with a 14, 13-year-old girl.
Jerry Lee Lewis.
Jerry Lee Lewis
and Elvis goes into the army.
Chuck Berry. No, but you look across the board,
right?
It was literally shut down. And Elvis in the army. It was shut down, and then you have a little stasis period, and then you have like Pat Boone really. And this kind of, almost easy listening and a lot of novelty. And that was when the guitar surf music started to take off. But it was obscure though. It wasn't, the mainstream was, they had this like really kind of cheap, like teenager music, right? It was, but like
Frankie Avalon. Frankie Avalon was big. Frankie Avalon was big.
But super pop, the whole rock thing, it was gone. But at the same time, you have, and it's really interesting to look at the children's records, right, that were played during like kindergarten, daycare, during the nap time. There's like one from the 50s called "I'm a Little Puppet." It's really bizarre. I have a clip of that somewhere. But so this programming is going on even in the 50s, but you have this stasis. And then, of course, then you have the LSD starting, in the early 60s, starting to come in, right, starting to generate. Right. And then you have the Beatles come as sort of, they're still, you have, the 50s, you got your groups, your manufactured, the Brill Building with like Supremes,
The Brill Building is really important. And I want to talk about them at some point because they all move west. They all go to California. They get into commercials. They get into writing I want to touch on them. And so let's just put an asterisk there. Keep going.
Yeah. So, you have this, but what I'm saying is that even the Beatles are coming out of that, you have the groups, they're all where, it's not the rock and roll era. It's commercial pop. So the Beatles come in, but they come in right at this exact interval from the JFK assassination.
The Beatles' first North American release takes place in Canada on the day of the JFK assassination.
They are directly connected with the JFK assassination.
I've gone down this rabbit hole.
Okay, you have. Okay, great. Yeah,
I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, it is even all these numerological significance with them. In fact, when they first came, the hysteria was fake, right? They hired people to do that. Weren't all that image, everyone screaming, yeah. But I want to hold your hand. This is the Beatles, America. We're picking you up, and it was, it was that important, and even Michael often talks about also, and I've noted too. You have the change in the fashions from wool and linen and silk to like polyester, these bright like ugly colors happening at the same time. Then you have the airdrop of the psychedelic 60s, which really came from the whole scene. Of course, in San Francisco, the human being. But this, so it kind of, one thing you could think it took a long time. It was just, it's amazing. Like, so I say 66, I say 63, of course, is like phase one, 63, 66 is sort of a special, that's a pivotal year. This is like the ritual year. Then 67 to 1970. So you have also 67 to 69. But these periods are all very, very, very deeply connected. And I'll say one last thing on this tip, and is that, for example, like the Rolling Stones, right? So the Rolling Stones came out as the bad boys, and the Beatles released a record, the Rolling Stones would come out even with a different, I've got photos of all this. So the album cover would be slightly different, but it'd be like kind of dark, right? You have Aftermath. Right. You have like Sgt. Pepper's, their Satanic Majesty's Request.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. But they have this back end bookend, like light and dark. And yet, of course, you know, well, we can get, that's a whole nother thing. But
I mean, that's it. I mean, I think you and I know that's Tavistock programming. I mean, that's what's going on there between those two groups. I tell you a missing link, and it just came to my mind when you were talking about this evolution and like this downtime between the end of rock and roll, the day the music died, and the birth of the Beatles. There's a genre that emerges during that time that, again, for me, is another manufactured genre for a very specific use and time period, and that's the folk scene.
I was just thinking of that. I was going to mention that. You're reading, it's like you're reading my mind, because that is so important, right? The folk scene. And then we could just fast forward to Leonard Cohen. I mean, Leonard Cohen has, anybody's seen that movie about the game show host who's actually like this assassin? And
right.
Leonard Cohen, that was Leonard Cohen. I mean, he was deployed. He did do intelligence work, and he did do assassinations.
Leonard Cohen was in the IDF and was likely a Mossad agent.
No, he did work in Central America. He did hits.
Yeah, but he was a member of the IDF. He was actually in Israel as a soldier in the IDF. Okay, so I believe that he was drafted by the Mossad through the IDF to do that stuff.
Yeah, and that the film about the game show host is
called A Dangerous Mind, about Chuck Barris.
Yeah, Chuck Barris, but that's really more pertinently about Leonard Cohen. And Leonard Cohen is, he's connected with, of course, the folk era. There's a lot of, you have all kinds of, you have avant-garde classical music, electronic music, you know what I mean? Coming out all that time, the New York scene, loft scene. But like Leonard Cohen, he has influence, but yet, of course, the guy has like a 3-note range. You know what I mean? But he has these lyrics and these very deep songs that, and then Lennon has it in a much simpler way of these are like, induction, reverse induction, hypnosis, Ericksonian trance.
Oh, he's an NLP master. He's an NLP master. He puts that crowd in a trance at the Isle of Wight because they were going nuts on probably the same bad acid they had at Altamont, and he talks them into submission. And
that is what, there's so much that goes into that. I won't go into that whole aspect of the mental programming, right? That actually, it goes out to the society, because this is something Ewan Cameron, and there's research on this. You have Kurt Lewin, psychological topology.
Ewan Cameron from the same McGill University, where Leonard Cohen is associated with, by the way.
But Ewan Cameron, the McGill thing was much later, right? Of course, but he was, his first really big gig was the social, the absolute total reconstruction of German culture, society, after World War II. So he was there and connected as almost like a sort of a cultural czar, very important in that post-war, and there's a major rollout point of a lot of these technologies. And then, though, he worked on this group psychology stuff and mass induction stuff, for example, and he wrote, and these books now are all impossible to find, but he talks about insane musicians that are mentally ill will create mental illness or potential aspects of that in the audience, and they will then spread that out into the society. So it's like it's that there's like a you can catch mental illness, but this is related to like magnetic theory and all this stuff that sort of disappeared from the literature. But anyways, this whole process is really fascinating because you can see all these juncture points, and Manson was so important. Right, Manson. You have Manson and Altamont. So you have these almost like two, as you said, these like bookends. And I like bringing up Isle of Wight. You know what I mean? Because go ahead.
No. I keep going back to this whole folk thing because to me, it's one of those chapters that a lot of people don't pay attention to, and it becomes the soundtrack for the civil rights movement and Martin Luther King and the whole protest generation, right? So the whole protest generation has its roots in this whole folk community. And a lot of those groups, they're all, kind of as manufactured as some of the pop bands that come out of the Brill Building scene, like Peter, Paul, and Mary are totally manufactured, right? And then, one of their biggest hits is like Puff the Magic Dragon, which I'm sure you probably have a lot to say about on some. That's one of those children's tunes, right? Right. And yeah. And when you eat, and I was going to bring this up too, like when you get into the genesis of the Brill Building scene around circa 64, 65, a lot of the pop groups take on almost like baby talk. Like they have these phrases in their like goo goo gaga. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mentioned adolescent infantilizing. It's, right, and it's the kid songs, but no, sorry, back to the folk. I got rerouted. Yeah. So the folk, this was the movement for, so this is also the transition from the beats, the jazz beat scene, right, into the hippie scene. Right. Yeah. So the folk scene, but the folk scene, of course, very important, it was very much tied into the Communist Party.
Absolutely. 100%.
They're
all commies.
But actually, when people, I remember, it's like, it's almost like the marker of like some idiot. Oh, they're talking about commies or communism. No, there were active communist cells. I've got all these, absolutely these FBI report. So these, we're talking about actual subversive cells, like a Pete Seeger, big time. These, and so, and not only that though, but it was, so it's okay. It's kind of return to the roots, Americana. You do have a number of artists, coming out of, like the bluegrass, people. It gave a new lease on life for some of these folk musicians, which is great. Actual folk musicians, but it was part of this coffee house scene. It was also part of this Bob Dylan with his lyrics, right? What are, like, first of all, a lot of people say, oh man, I love Dylan. Dylan's great. Let's be honest. The guy, okay, and I may even do a Hendrix song before this closes. So a lot of people, I'm not going to say I'm a great singer. Maybe I suck, but I can sing a tune. Bob Dylan is a really bad singer. He had these songs that were like these epics, like Masters of War, blowing in the wind, and other songs that were really, some were very interesting, but some of them also are just, these riffing, things that they're literally their hypnotic programming, as well as, he plagiarized half of shit. But Bob Dylan, of course, is a folk scene transitioning. He goes electric, Yep. And then the electricity. And so what you can see is almost like a false dichotomy, right? You're coming out of the beats, right? And so a lot of that coffee house culture, and that communist culture or whatever. Communist actual infiltration of cells that are agents that are doing things very deliberately.
Woody Guthrie was an avowed communist.
Yeah.
Right. And Woody Guthrie is like the John the Baptist of the folk scene. So it's rife with those ideas. So I don't know if you've gone down this Dylan rabbit hole, but I used to work at this magazine in San Francisco a long time ago, and the girlfriend of the editor of the magazine said that she knew the guy that wrote Dylan's lyrics. Okay. And I was like really interested in this. I'm like, you got to write a story about this. Like, come on, just interview he never did it, but that's stuck in my head. Like, okay, there's probably a really good chance Dylan didn't write his lyrics. And I'm not a huge fan of Miles Mathis. I like some of his stuff. I'm not an acolyte, because I think some of his other stuff could be very misleading. But he did a really interesting piece on who wrote Dylan's lyrics.
Okay.
And I think he's probably right. He thinks that Leonard Cohen wrote Dylan's lyrics because that there were only two people who could approach sort of the biblical imagery that shows up in Dylan's lyrics at that time. One of them is Paul Simon and the other is Leonard Cohen. And I think he's probably right. I think Leonard Cohen wrote that early canon of Dylan. And then Dylan has that weird like motorcycle accident, right?
Yeah.
Right. And then he's never the same after that.
Britney Spears moment. Yeah.
Yeah. So
No,
what are your thoughts on that?
That's you know, that's quite interesting. You know, and it could actually be possible. You know, well, Dylan, I mean, there is a lot of plagiarism, okay, and stuff borrowed, but the conceptual thing and that roadmap and that complexity, Leonard Cohen would be a very interesting candidate. Because one thing, I mean, Dylan was connected, you know, in Minneapolis. I mean, this with you know, so he was linked in with some of these aspects because that guy came, you know, out of nowhere. And there's artists that were really great. There's a guy that was this amazing like singer-songwriter. And if you could remember his name, it'd be awesome. It'd be great to tell me that. But he did like one record. He was a huge influence on all these other people. Someone dosed him. He was out in England. He got dosed. He lost his mind. He may even still be alive. But it's like, you know, one of the most tragic stories in music, right? This guy had the real talent. He got taken out. But Dylan was, you know, I mean,
he's manufactured. Bob Dylan, let's just cut to the chase.
Okay.
He's a manufactured individual symbol for that time. He's created. Bob Dylan is created. And he's probably got Leonard Cohen writing his lyrics. He's coming out of this rich, fertile field of the folk scene and the coffee house scene. And he, to your point, is going to be this bridge that is going to take that world into the world of electronics when he plays Newport and breaks out his guitar and people go nuts.
Exactly. And think of how that was a huge deal, right? I mean, because the folk, and one thing, you know, you can hear is, great example though, are some of these, the kids' music at that time is really weird, you know, especially from like 57 on. And I even have some, I get these, you know, thrift store or whatever. I've got a whole collection of these things. They're really bizarre. But that folk scene, it laid the groundwork because in a sense, Bob Dylan is like a mythological figure. He's he's like a god. I mean, he is, and this importance, like, you know, these songs blowing in the wind. I mean, I'm not going to swear on your show.
You can.
What is it actually? Blowing in the wind, man. The answer is blowing in the wind. That doesn't sound real affirmative to me. Blowing in the wind, you know? Like, so what you find is
like a Rolling Stone, right?
Yeah.
There's another one for you.
Yeah. But, you see what you find is a lot of these patterns, right? You know, in just touching on the Schizmogenesis, which is these, especially linguistic patterns of meaning, right? That are types of cybernetic linguistic systems that are embedded in some of these really iconic, you know, songs, you know, like the Beatles, you know, you just start looking at their lyrics. John Lennon, I mean, you know, on one level, it literally doesn't mean anything except for I'm just going to like drift around or this, that. But but if you look at these layers and certain words are emphasized, that's Ericksonian types of hypnosis where you talk and you can put someone in a trance. And that's not even the meaning semantic level, right, of it. But all this stuff is so encoded. But then, like you said, he's manufactured, but not only, like, you can't, I don't know. I mean, like Leonard Cohen is maybe a, you know, manufacturer, because I don't know.
I don't know if Cohen is manufactured. I think Cohen.
Well, manufacturer. He's he's a ringleader.
Yeah. So Cohen is a handler. And I've talked to people. I did a show one time with a woman by the name of Ann Diamond, who for a period of time was handled by Leonard Cohen. He's a handler. So was a personal handler. He's a cultural handler. I think he was Dylan's handler and part of the creation of Dylan. That's my take on Cohen.
I would, I know people that know Miles Mathis. Some of his stuff, I have to say, is like, certain things you're going to destabilize your meaning. And it's not, and when I see leaks of logic in certain senses, hopefully, you know, he may be a great guy. I don't know him personally. I usually don't criticize others, but this sounds completely on the money. I mean, that makes
it makes sense. I don't buy his JFK thing, by the way, and I don't even buy his Manson thing, you know, So but the Dylan deconstruction makes a lot of sense to me. So I want to talk a little bit about this movement from New York, right? Because if you go back and look at, I think it's a very interesting movement. If you look at, say, the 1950s, which is what you're talking about, and even up into like around 65, 66, everything is happening in New York. TV is happening in New York. Theater is happening in New York. Music is happening in New York, which is where the Brill Building comes into play. And for people that don't know the Brill Building, it was this building that housed all these major singer-songwriters, mostly songwriters at the time, Neil Diamond, Doc Pomus, Laura Nyro. And then they go west. They go to Hollywood, and then TV goes west, right? It goes from New York. They stop making shows. Carson goes from New York to LA. And this is where all this stuff really starts to happen, right? And it's right around 64, 65.
Well, that's a great point to bring up. And just to say something, I mean, you have, things like this also in the jazz age and pop songs then. But the Brill Building was like literally like, it's like a, it's like a manufacturing plant. I mean, you walk in off the street, you get lessons, you get identity, name, how to dance, how to talk, you get your songs, you get your music, you get everything. It's like it's a complete, you literally, I mean, they did everything in that building. But yeah, a lot of these songwriters came out of there, even looking like Steely Dan. And these were songwriters. Right. They were composers. But see, in the 1960s, you have these like the trauma, right, of that, the JFK assassination, but even the trauma, that rock and roll era, the freedom, boom, it shut down. When it comes, and it's like I said, it's on. When it comes back, it's like boom, Inagata Davida, and whatever, Iron Butterfly, Vanilla Fudge, acid rock, total. Radical, I mean, that's like almost out of nowhere unless you're listening to like say Albert Ayler or free jazz, right? But anyways, back to the movement. So you have New York as a center, and then because Los Angeles, it was even when you had what's his name, the dancer guy that was buddies with Zappa, the
Vitas Kalakis,
Vitas. So I mean, there was not much of a music scene. It was basically lame. Right,
strip clubs. LA was strip clubs.
Yeah, there was no. I mean, it was not. I mean, there were some in certain areas. There were some like kind of jazz clubs that were well known. You play, but they're like up some nice restaurant up on the lighthouse, or what I mean. But it wasn't. And then there's all your coffee shops for folk music. Blah blah blah. But yeah, not a club scene at all. Period. In fact, one of the worst places in the country, given the size of that state and the city. So why shift there? And look how fast that place is transformed.
Just overnight, just like almost from 64 to 66, it's like, interstellar overdrive. And then this, so you brought this up earlier with the Beatles and all the manufactured hysteria. So when they had, I think it was the Byrds was the first group that kind of, would play at the Whiskey A Go-Go, and this Vitas guy would bring his freaks down from Laurel Canyon, and they created the scene, right? Like they brought them in there, and I've tried to find the video, but it's really hard to find now. But I think it's Charles Corral, and he's in LA, and he's looking at this new scene called the freak scene.
Yeah, and what's really interesting with that, we are sure everyone's familiar with all the whole Laurel Canyon thing, but yeah, Laurel Canyon,
pretty sophisticated group here. Yeah,
Laurel Canyon, has of course the Air Force, basically Air Force Media Center, right, where they're producing. It's like a it's this like hidden base on top of this hill that does create. It constructs media. It's a full professional film studio. I mean, it's like a Hollywood grade full-on production house, as well as whatever other functions are doing. But then you have this scene that's arising, and then Zappa is very interesting because there's a lot in Zappa. The song like Who Would Know They'd Freak Out in Minnesota, freak out in Boston. He's talking also about Ken Kesey's route with the Magic Bus, the Merry Pranksters. Zappa talks about a lot of this stuff as
he does. He talks about a guy from the CIA that's hanging out in the Laurel Canyon in one of his tunes.
I'm gonna sleep on. I'm gonna wear a rug and sleep on Owsley's floor. All these songs. What's there to live for? Let's join the Peace Corps. I think I'll just drop out. Really. But the thing is, number one, it's interesting is that mass movement had not yet really occurred, or was maybe the inception when Zappa's writing these, analytical, things about these, you know what I mean? And Zappa was what I'm saying? That he was writing about this meta-analysis of the stuff sometimes before it actually was really blowing up.
But he's also in it. Like Zappa's also in the scene.
He's in the scene. Vinny and they're dancing at his shows. My dad, he saw Zappa back in Berkeley, and I think the only thing he remembered was like the fuck song or something. He had this, but it was like this crazy scene. But what I'm saying is like all these things are like included in the, like, it's almost like a cast of characters. It's like a pantheon,
right.
It's being rolled out. But yeah, so that thing, coming out, but just think of the time scale. Like, so we can think of, like, to get a sense of like duration, think about Corona beginning and now. To me, like that past year and a half, almost like, I was doing
it equals that time scale, really, from about 64 to late 65, early 66. It is a completely different world.
And it changed the entire, it's not like something that happened that just went away. You know what I mean? It's not like, hula hoop craze or something, it's like this, it's transformed society, transformed our in a very, comprehensive way. In certain ways, I mean, like Jim Morrison, I'll say at least a number of these quote unquote artists, right? Thing is, I have a more critical sense. Some of them are really not that good, right? The Beatles, say their music, pretty high quality music, whatever else is there. They at least, it's interesting. It's it's amazingly well produced. I was, I'm doing production like Sgt. Pepper's. That's you can hear every single voice. Even you can keep listening to the depth of that record. It's almost like infinite. Like you can hear like just even the click, on the hi-hat. You can hear like the slider, and you can hear, like even like minor, the sound of the pedal, it's amazing. These are like what I'm saying, that depth of that recording is insane. Very, right, present day, past 10 years, everything's compressed, this compression stuff. So it's all flatline, but that Sgt. Pepper's, man, listen to it. And like, how's that's never been done before since, that's what I want to know is, but anyways, the flattening of the perspective, but this transformation, really, it's, I think it's important to understand where we are right now. I think because we're still in this era, right? The 60s are still alive for us in a certain way.
In a certain way, I think they are. In another way, they're, I think they're dead. And when I say dead, I'm talking about like, no offense to the boomer generation out there, because I know a lot of them are cool people, right? But the ideas, the ideals, and the things that they stood for during that period of time, these are the same people that are getting jacked up and urging other people to get jacked up. So yeah, it's still with us. In some ways, it's completely dead and barren. So I wanted to ask you about you said some interesting stuff on Jan Irvin show. And it had to do with Owsley and Owsley's background in technology and the emergence of these people. It's not just like a manufactured scene with a message, but it's also the technology that comes along during that time to amplify that message. You want to talk a little bit about this major shift in technology that takes place?
Yeah, well, you have... I'll get back to this. I was going to read some quotes about the psychophysiological effects, even going back to jazz, like what it can do to the nervous system, the body. And this is stuff that was written at the time, contemporaneous. But I'll go to your question first, because it sort of relates. That I thought you were going to read my mind again. That's what. But basically, with the Princeton Radio Project, right? So you have Henry Cantrell is doing a lot of these experiments with these immersive sort of holotropic environments. So it's not like you're going into a movie theater, but it's like this sound, light, even fragrances, but it's not even music, different speaker array.
It's like a sensorium.
Sensorium, yeah, exactly, like an LSD experience, right? And there's a film, which unfortunately not recalling the name of, but there's a film that has a very famous scene that was somewhat famous around late 50s, early 60s, black and white thing. But it has this guy's taken into this sort of this mind control chamber that's very similar to this sort of immersive experience, that Cantrell's working at with the Radio Project. But so you have this advent of technology, but the technology first we have to understand is that, well, you have guitar amplifiers, you have going back to the playing in the big band in the 1930s, so you still have your initial amplifiers. As long as you have a TV, your radio thing, there's a way to amplify a signal, your loudspeaker, so that's not really new. But what you have is this integrative aspect, which I'm tying it into this Cantrell thing of this sensorium, where you have, for example, let's say the aspect of the body and movement, the relational body, right? So your body, you enter a space. What space are you in? How do you relating? These are things that are mostly unconscious to most people, right? But you can be conscious of it, but most of the time you say you're going to a concert, you're almost part of a herd. So you're no longer necessarily, you're basically you just jumped into a stream or a river and it's pulling you along. But to get people to the point where they'll let themselves be subjected to some of this stuff that started to happen. Because it was, so you have Ken Kesey, and his band, that was really part of the research phase of this. And this is, 63, 64, whatever. This was, coming out, and probably, I can go into detail about Ken Kesey, but, his cover story of just, I was, I had this job
working at Stanford in the psych ward, right? He was an orderly, right?
He has it like he was in, even though he's at the university, it's more like he kind of put it across, I worked as an orderly in a mental hospital.
That's right. Yeah.
That Stanford thing is usually not mentioned, but he just does a test. He gets to do a test. And he's an all-American guy, right? He's like Jack Kerouac.
Wrestler. He's a wrestler from Oregon.
Yep.
That's where he comes from. Yep.
Yeah, like Jack Kerouac, the all-American boy, the alpha male sacrificed on the altar of the Beat Generation, right? He's another figure. But he has that kind of charisma of Kerouac. He takes LSD suddenly, instead of just being this sort of working class stiff, he writes One Who Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, right? Which is about what? It's about the insane are actually sane. Right. The world you see around you.
Very interesting point.
The world you see around you is actually a prison. You think you're free. You're in a mental prison. All these societal rules, everything around you is a prison. Right. And this was a very important idea. This idea of schizophrenia or insanity being a type of sanity, being connected with creativity, being connected with, mystical spiritual states. At the same time, you have similar people trying to, they have these things where they throw out like Bateson, or R.D. Lang, The Divided Self, right? So R.D. Lang.
If you ever read Knots, you want to go insane. If you want to go insane, just read Knots by R.D. Lang. That's all you got to do.
Yeah. But so I'm just getting background for the technology, right? So this is there also. And so you start with, it really starts with the acid test. The acid test, where And this was done. I mean, I've watched much footage, of the actual what the actual acid tests were like. Okay, and so it's like you walk into this house, you got the Grateful Dead, Jerry's never ending meandering, major pentatonic, come on, Jerry, you ever? I'm just kidding. Jerry's all right, but anyways, you got the Grateful Dead playing, kind of half-ass blues rock. They weren't that, you know what I mean? They're not. They would jam out, but they weren't. We're not talking like, it was like Hendrix and Stevie Winwood, and, Billy Cobham and, you know what I mean? Like some musicians with Miles Davis band, you know what I mean? Like really good musicians that are improvising in that kind of environment. Sun Ra Orchestra, how about that?
Right.
You got the Grateful Dead as your house band, and where they're doing, but they're doing a lot of these folk songs kind of, too, that they're just rocking up, right? But anyways, all these lights, sounds, and speakers, a lot of the stuff, there's like really crazy, can you hear my voice? 1, 2, like weird, really friggin' disturbing, man. Not like, you think it's like, oh, it's acid test. I'm like, this is like, this is an induction of, this is basically, sure you're aware of photic driving, right? So you have types of psychic driving in certain ways, right? And one, of course, rhythm, sound, this, that, semantic, lyrical meaning, but light photic driving is very important. You can induce all these, trance hypnotic states just by, varying, flicker rates with different side, wherever the lights, the positioning of lights, going on and off, colors, all the the light show. So the whole 60s light show evolved out of research that was done in a lot of different areas, and I can go into that maybe later or not.
Well, you and Cameron does some of that research, the psychotronic stuff and psychic driving. So I think there's probably some level of psychic driving in this, but applied to maybe kind of a different, I don't want to use the word standard, but they were using different tools, different aesthetics.
No, it was. Well, no, it's not. I'm just saying like the science of like the photic driving, but that's also really important. So just to go into the technology. So the light technology, the visual technology, then you have, which Owsley was instrumental in, was building this whole new generation of sound equipment, of really getting, especially really total different arrays of the frequency spectra, right? Like very low bass frequencies, like all kinds of stuff, and having these being clear. He did a lot of work with the Dead, and so he helped, a lot of the, the whole sort of sonal environment we live in right now. But the technological aspect was that, again, what I'm saying, to me, it's just coming from, the psychic driving. If you look at that, the photo everyone's seen of the person in the Ewan Cameron experiment, the black and white photo, I mean, that's basically what this is. This was a type of psychic driving. In this case, though, you were not involuntarily, subjected to drugs. You were taking them voluntarily, right? You know what I mean? And, then that's a big part of it. The LSD and all kinds of different stuff. I mean, if you've heard, I'm sure you're aware, I was doing this, just going in and looking at what it was like at the Fillmore, what it was like. I mean, the amount, there was a lot, maybe the weed wasn't as strong as it is now, but there was a ton of stuff going on, all kind, fear and loathing. That's a, fear and loathing environment, right? It wasn't just, it was lots of drugs. And this is these events. And so you have to get the individual being willing to subject themselves to that. You know what I mean? And that's why I remember that kind of got me out of, I remember going to certain shows, rock shows, and I'm like, this is doing something bad to me. I don't know, you know what I mean? I need,
what show, can you remember what show that was?
Oh God. I remember, early Jane. No, it wasn't. Jane's Addiction actually was pretty good. I saw early Jane. I saw Nirvana when before they were popular. I was like,
right. Yeah. I lived in Olympia, Washington, and they were hanging around there just before they became big.
Specifically, I can't, at this moment, I can't say. I mean, I know I can. There's certain things like like this rave, this like techno thing, but but it was not. Let me to specify, it wasn't just one. It was like, and it may have even been some kind of it may have been something like Throbbing Gristle or Butthole Surfers, something in that, like that. But that.
So you saw Throbbing Gristle?
Yeah.
Okay, we need to bookmark that. Return to that.
Okay, but that that I started to experience that same thing in other contexts. In fact, I was playing like a festival, some kind of a hippie thing, and and I was and I could feel this whole chemical thing of all like the whatever people want. It was like this whole presence. It was just like, what I mean. And it wasn't I was just doing some whatever blues rock jam shit, whatever. But it was like I could see this thing spreading out. It was so visceral to me. It was like a cloud almost of the energy that's getting out there from the music, especially with the drugs. It doesn't necessarily have to be even a really big artist, but I started really noticing that. And I avoided certain things, but I mean, I have now I know why, right? But I'm kind of glad. I think that, because you get pulled into a scene, right? That's the thing when you're, in your, late teens, early 20s or whatever, you're pulled into a scene. It's part of your friends. It's, what I mean? So you go to these shows, you go, oh, we're all taking LSD. Aren't you going to take LSD? This, that, what I mean? So it has that. And it's, I don't know. I felt like I was the only one witnessing this. Right, but it got so bad that I saw, like, I'm kind of jumping ahead, but I saw like this, it was like a vision. I stepped into this future world that we're kind of inhabiting now. And that's probably one of the reasons I went to India, because it was just everywhere. I mean, it was like this. I mean, I'm sure if I want to bring that back to my consciousness, I'd rather not, but I'm not saying it's any better. It's probably far worse, right? But I'm saying that like this was like permeating, like, what I mean? It's like that vibrational space that's permeating the culture. What I mean? Right. And whether the music is an outgrowth of that or the music is conditioning of that, they're both part of the same thing. Mm-hmm. And so the sensorium, just to fast forward technology, it's the future. It's 5G, it's 6G. It's our brains implanted, permanently in the hive mind computer. It's people whole lives playing video games and social media. What I mean? People that kill themselves, they don't get enough likes. That is what
you could see the birth of that hive mind in the 60s. Like that is the genesis of the hive mind. Definitely. Yep. That's a great way of connecting it. Okay. So what do I want? There's a couple things I want to ask you about. Let's talk. I want to go back to Throbbing Gristle. Okay. Let's talk about Throbbing Gristle for a minute. And a lot of people may not be aware of Throbbing Gristle, but one of the members of Throbbing Gristle is a guy by the name of Genesis P-Orridge, who is, I actually met Genesis one time. It was creepy. He's a creepy
He's really
creepy dude. But when you were talking with Jan, I wanted to jump into the conversation because you guys were talking about the Rolling Stones. You're talking about Altamont, and there was something else that you were really, really close to, but you weren't quite there. And I was talking with Mr. Cruz about this. I said, I really wanted these guys to like talk about Morocco and the role that Morocco plays in this entire scene, right? Because you've got Brian Jones going to Morocco, hanging out with Bashir Attar, the master musicians of Jajuka. And then you've got this whole other scene with Peter Whitehead and Howard Marks and William Burroughs and Paul Bowles and Brian Geisen, and these are all the precedents of Genesis P-Orridge and Throbbing Gristle. Like that's the scene that ultimately he kind of emerges out of in some ways. Can you dive into this Morocco thing? Because I think it's like one of the big missing pieces.
Well, that's interesting. You brought that up because William S. Burroughs. So we have like different figures. I'm not going to go onto this. I'm getting this. It's like I get ideas like seeing this almost like this hierarchy. You know what I mean? It's like this whole array. But you can see someone say like William S. Burroughs, in Morocco. Brian Jensen, with he had the trance
the Dream Machine. It was the Dream Machine.
And that's right. Yeah. I made one of those. I had a turn, to get a turntable and change the speed, and that's exactly it. That's Photo Driver, right? But so William S. Burroughs, you got this sort of this connection of the beats, but this is where the intel aspect becomes a little more apparent of the beat generation, right? Mm-hmm. So, Jack Kerouac is becoming, this fat slug. Anyone doesn't know Jack Kerouac, he wrote On the Road. He's really an iconic
Dharma Bums is another one of his works.
Dharma Bum. Yeah. But anyways, so Burroughs is there, and has intel contacts, experimenting a lot with drugs, looking for Yage. So you have this sort of almost this cauldron, right? It's almost like this is like the sorcerer's cauldron where they're making the potion to go carry back to the mainland and get everyone in the trance, right? So it's kind of more advanced, and also a lot of debauchery, of course. William S. Burroughs.
Well, it's a hotbed for young boys. They're going to Morocco to hang out with young boys. That's part of it. There's a lot of hashish in Morocco, and then you have this sort of expat, like I don't know, this weird expat scene, and then musically you've got this trance music that is going on in the background, this Ganawa music, the Bashir Attar and the master musician, and this it's not just music, but it's also connected to this tribal culture, which plays a role in all this whole thing. So it's really a trippy kind of like environment, right? The intel part of it, I think, is like a big piece, right? And I'm sure there's other players here that I'm missing along the way.
Who's that? Burroughs' lover was what's his name? A guy. He's like very important, like developing artificial intelligence. He's a big mathematics guy, very super famous mathematician. I think he broke the whatever World War II.
Oh, the code. I know who you're talking about.
But he was one of. But yeah, well, I mean, I haven't honestly, like the Morocco scene. I haven't, the connections. I haven't thought about it that much, but it is quite interesting. The trance music, what you have is sort of a technology, right, of inducing trance, right, of states. And in case this is being used for, what can be used a lot of stuff. My first book, which I wrote, I was living with this tribe in the Himalayas in Northwest India. It's called Trance, Ritual, and Rhythm. But this particular group, they used, these very weird and kind of complex rhythms to, their whole society was based on becoming possessed by different entities. Even in the court, the judge, the court, even the legal disputes were settled by these mediums. Like they had to go. So it was the whole area was like where the Mahabharata took place. So it's, very, very remote area, but there are all these relics and stuff. But like, for example, like one trance, you have to put your hand in molten metal and hold it there and bring it out. Then you prove you're in trance. If you're not in trance, it's going to burn your hand off. Right. But they have, there's this huge iron ball and, your trance, you pick it up and throw it. Right. But anyways, this was there and it was a possession and trance possession. That's very important also in the Jujuku. I mean, they're summoning spirits. So it's not, we think of music, you also think of it more as a technology, right?
Right.
You'd say a spiritual or psychic technology that can be deployed in different ways, right? And so in that case, it's not so much about, it's not about like say the lyrics, or it's about the rhythms, the tones, the specific frequencies, the whole thing put together, taken apart as an apparatus that can be installed into a rock band, for example, to take some of these aspects, for induction of trance or whatever, even so that's one, potential aspect. But you have more to say about Morocco. Have you seen the movie?
Yeah. So Genesis, I think he kind of comes out of that world a little bit. Like there's other elements, with the London scene that he is connected to, but he comes out of that kind of Morocco world, which is, have you ever looked into Peter Whitehead? You know who Peter Whitehead is?
Yeah, yeah. I've in the past I have, but I would say with Genesis Peorage, one aspect here is the ritual occult aspect, of course, because Genesis Peorage is very much. I mean, that's this is like sort of the.
He's a Thelemite. He's a Thelemite.
Yeah, Thelemite, and also probably other orders. So this is very of course he's very direct about that. I mean, that's kind of part of his identity. But then, of course, most people say, "Oh, it's art," like Maria Abramovich, right? I mean, it's just art. But so go ahead to your point.
No. So Genesis is this. Peter Whitehead was a filmmaker, and he did some films of the Rolling Stones, and then he winds up going to. I believe like it's Morocco, and I think that's the main area that he hangs out in. But he winds up marrying into the Goldschmidt family, which is one of these really powerful English families. And I think one of his daughters dies. It's like there's always these weird deaths around these people too, right? Like when Keith Richards gets that house in the south of France, and they record Exile on Main Street there, right? There's a guy who was a young kid that was there in that house. His father was a photographer for the Stones at the time, and he wound up becoming an actor, and he was the husband of what's her name? Patricia Arquette on the TV show Medium. Okay, this is the dude, right? So he's in this documentary with about this period of time where they're doing Exile on Main Street in this place in the south of France. His mother dies during the recording of that record. And there's almost always these weird deaths, these ritualized deaths that go along with, these figures, just like with Peter Whitehead and, the death of one of his daughters. And then you see this kid's mother dies during the recording of this record with the Stones. There's just all these really just bizarre links with these different people and these different scenes. And there's like this strange 6 degrees of separation, right? There's like a very little space between like the Stones and Brian Jones and Jajuka, and then Kenneth Anger and the Manson family. Like it's like dark pearls on a string. And it's just so bizarre how all these forces come together, and some of which I think is planned. And I'd like your thoughts on the unplanned aspect of this. And when I talk about the unplanned aspect, it's like the occult forces that bring these people together, like the unseen world. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, that's quite interesting. I was actually the show of the yacht. I had a bunch of pictures I was going to show of just all these different things, but how the sort of inclusions of sort of occult aspects into culture, society. You have like Bewitched. I Dream of Jeannie. Even that seems like
right. You were talking about on Jan show, and
I did.
It's like absolutely, yeah.
But so there's you find like really and I started getting into the Stones a lot. The Stones are much, much darker than you think. I mean, they're not, they were deep, at least Keith Richards and Mick, were definitely, engaged in, black ritual occult stuff.
Oh, I heard that they would actually go to America, and that they would actually have adrenochrome rituals, right, with young black kids, because they were really interested in the melanin. Like they were like, that was their thing. And they would go to LA, and that's where it would take place.
That's wild.
Right. And they're by the way, the rumor is that there was also some level of cannibalism involved as well. So,
well, that's what's that Beggar's Banquet. Album cover. Bring that up.
Yeah.
I've been using only my actual brain. I've not even looked anything up on the internet here. So But yeah, no, that's it. That's it. Well, that's you know,
I'll find it for you real fast.
I saw you know, stuff sort of alluding to that, but I couldn't get, you know, totally clear evidence. But what is it, like Let It Bleed? I'm trying to think of one of these album covers. One of them, they have like in the, I think it's the inside, they're having like a feast, right? And I think there's,
yeah, it's in Beggar's Banquet.
but I think there's not. I think it's supposed to be like a corpse or something on there. But okay, there's
it's on the inside, and
okay.
I'll bring up the cover here, or it's not the cover, the image. So that's what you're talking about right there, right?
Yeah, and there's like a double spread though. Oh, that is it. There's okay, but anyways, there's a lot of stuff in that picture, and there's a fold out, and there's, you know, other aspects. So I mean, yeah, the unplanned, like, is it that you can bring up their Satanic Majesty's Request? That's kind of a fun cover also. Right. But to what extent, you know, this ties in very well. This ties into, you know, Son of Sam. Process Church is a very big, you know, aspect of this, right? Process Church and other connected orders. It goes back with the Beatles. You have this even Funkadelic, right? Was way into the Process Church.
Oh, that's interesting. I did not know that.
That's Maggot Brain. They have a. If you're tripping and listening to the Maggot Brain, on the back cover, they have this text, right? There's like some weird, I think it's like a skull or whatever, and then there's a text, a Process Church, like a paragraph from the Process Church. You know what I mean? You know, you can see it, but you have to kind of really look at it to read it. But these clowns, you know. No, but so going back, is that?
Here's Saturn, right? Here's Saturn.
Yeah.
Right exactly. At the top. Interesting.
There's a lot of different symbolism in that, you know, you can, because this is like, you know, this kind of thing is meant, this is like, you know, that subliminal advertising, right? It's meant to affect you subconsciously. It's a lot of these, even just like a lot of the song lyrics, right? It's, you're going to see something there, and then all the other stuff is going to be totally subconscious. You know what I mean? And it's influence. And a lot of this stuff is like that. But so back to your question, is this, you know, was all this occult stuff planned? Because it also was a very big subtext, right? The whole, right. I think, and the Moroccan thing ties into that. Yep. You know, the aspects, you know, you have, of course, you have the whole beat, the side rail of the beat, but then you have all these spiritualist movements. You know, California is a hotbed for, like, from the 1890s.
I lived there, man. I grew up in California. I was at ground zero. Like, when, you know, my parents took me to San Francisco a couple of times. We drove through Haight-Ashbury during the Summer of Love when I was a kid, and it was fucking nuts. It was, I mean, really, I mean, I swear to God, we're driving through Haight-Ashbury, and it looked like it was seething. The streets were seething with people, and they had their shirts off, and they're dancing, and it's like they looked like they were insane. Like I'm a 7-year-old kid, and I'm like, these people are nuts, right? That's what it looked like. It had the vibe of an open air insane asylum. Now, and I'm sure they were like having all kinds of great experiences around love and free sex and all that shit, right? But from an outsider, from a 7-year-old's perspective, it looked completely nuts.
Yeah. That's no, I mean, the Grateful Dead, there's a lot of stuff also in the Grateful Dead. These bands, you don't think of the Rolling Stones as being really occultic or Grateful Dead, but these guys.
Oh, they are. Oh, no, they are.
They are. And this is where, what I mentioned, the influence is coming. You're feeling it. It's deep. It's much more, you know, powerful than, I know Throbbing Gristle, per se, you know, they're kind of more of that theater-esque type of thing, but, you know, they're all tied in. I mean, Kenneth Anger, Kenneth Anger, of course, a disciple of Aleister Crowley. And so this ties directly into Manson. You got Bobby Boussolet. Mick Jagger was supposed to star as Lucifer in Kenneth Anger's dreadful film, Lucifer Rising. There's such a finally got like an original uncut version. Like, this guy sucks ass. No, but he did some very interesting avant-garde films. And the guy that did the Smithsonian Anthology of World Folk, right, has the alchemical symbol, the alchemical processing of humanity. He picks a lot of really weird, dark currents of American music for that anthology. There's a very important influence of that release in was probably 1960, something like that. But the guy that compiled that was also an experimental filmmaker who is connected with Kenneth Anger. And that was connected very much with the whole, folk scene or people. It actually was people that wanted to get something deeper than was being played on the regular folk scene, right?
Was it Harry Smith?
Harry Smith. Yeah. So and look up some of his movies. They're very odd. And actually Kenneth Anger's experimental films. And so I'm jumping around a bit, but there's a movie, the Demon, right? It was this was made. This is totally a true story. It doesn't even seem like it's real, but some of the original filmmakers, especially this one guy in France, was very much connected with like occult, like ritual stuff. And the films, there's several films that things happen when people watch them, including this film, Night of the Demon or whatever. When it was first played, the audience literally went into a violent frenzy, or else like literally like an orgy, or like just trying to kill someone next to you don't even know, right? It was mass insanity. It happened in multiple places. It was shown. It was thought to be lost. It was shown in France for a select audience. The same thing happened when this black and white silent film was played, and that's an example of the entry of other types of energies into that film. So that's an interesting case, though, right? To see. And, it's relatively obscure, but when you look at these sort of, the occult circles and not, your new age bookstore, but people not even lowers or levels above or behind even what Crowley was doing, because Crowley was more of he was a public figure, even when he had his island, and he had, drove these people insane, right? That come and stay with him or, whatever. But these circles, right? And so the filmmaking was connected with that. This goes into certain avant-garde film, eventually connects with certain composers, right? Of when electronic music starts to be produced, from the late 50s. John Cage, I don't necessarily so bad, but so this electronic thing and all that merges back through after the technology, it merges also into the Grateful Dead, merges into sort of the rock spectrum as well, the trance music. So I just did like 4 points in one sentence. But
it totally makes sense. And one of the things that I keep coming back to, in this conversation in my head, because you have all of these influences that are swirling around. I mean, and a lot of people who were watching this were probably there in the 60s and the 70s. I mean, I was there, especially during the 70s. It was immersive. The culture was immersive. From commercials adopted like the whole plastic fad. It was like plastic psychedelia, plastic pop, so they were trying to sell products, but it wasn't just the commercials. You had a show like the Monkees, which is this created group, specifically created, and again, sort of mainstreaming a lot of the things that we're talking about, right? It becomes this mainstream vehicle for goofiness, for extended adolescence, for, kind of being these wise asses, right? And so it's immersive, and the immersion changes a bit during the 70s, but it's still immersive. And I participated in that, right? Like I was in these different scenes, and I was into exploring consciousness, because it was immersive. It's kind of what you did, right? And so what they created was this feeling of immersive consent by being inundated with these influences, which is, and maybe you can confirm this, but I think it's a really subtle form of psychic driving, right? And through this subtle form of cultural psychic driving, they create this immersive collective and individual consent along the way. What are your thoughts on that?
Yes. Well, psychic driving is one aspect. So, what you have is the experience of the world is mediated by images that are seen on a television, right? When there was 3 television channels, right? And television was a lot, even though people were, you couldn't watch it all day, but it was, very important, right? The film, and it could impact. So your language changes, right? I mean, when you see an image, your mind it goes on that connection between the mind and the image. With the psychic driving, what that does is allow the implementation of the programming, right? So that's more the carrier wave, right? The vector. And so the psychic driving through the stimulation, and then there's all of these aspects that are tied together. Like, for example, you have the monkeys, right? So you look at monkeys and you look at Yellow Submarine, okay? And the Beatles, and then Magical Mystery Tour also, but the Beatles movies, which are, considered to be kind of throwaway, but there's a lot of stuff in there of how this is being written into your brain almost. It's like there's a relational field of all these characters that, of these different emotions, of these types of reactions, even of influences to engage in certain types of behaviors, or, almost going into your own personal issues and then merging with it. We're talking about cultural artifacts. We're talking about, behavior. We're talking about song lyrics. We're talking about the sounds permeating the space, and even it goes into, eventually it can become a subconscious thing that you're not even aware that this array of noise.
That's exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
It's immersive, right? It is an immersive environment where you're being hit with, especially during the, it's happening now in a different way, because you can't find a commercial now that has like a white male in it unless he's gay, right? So it's a different kind of immersion, but it was like on a commercial level, on a musical level, right? And on a fashion level, on a product level, like there was this immersion, and there's also, and I think maybe this ties into your schizogenesis, right? That while this is happening, you have all these traumatic events going on in the background, right? You starting with Kennedy, and you just go through the Vietnam War, and you've got the assassinations. So on the one hand, you've got this immersive cultural kind of medium that people are being soaked in. And then there's this undercurrent of trauma again and again and again. Does this tie into this idea of schismogenesis?
Well, it does. It ties, my thing, I was working on this model of looking at all these, seeing how they recycle events, seeing what programming, like looking at the kids' records, seeing what kids listen to, or children's programs, and then you see things that come later, right? And it doesn't, I would just qualify when you say immersive, it's not immersive, like, for at least in my estimation, than say walking into an acid test where
it's not like that, but it's an open air immersion.
But the immersion goes into your subconscious. It goes into this is very well understood. It's called the inner mirror, right? The inner mirror that Lacan talked about, and Adorno, inner mirror of the pop song, right? Where the person hears the pop song, and there's like a phase, basically the psychological phase. The inner mirror is sort of like where you see your father, your kid, and then it's like he's reflected in yourself, as like you're looking in the mirror of like what the ideal is or what you're trying to be. So it's like there's like a separation, but it's supposed to be like a stage of psychological development. If that is not processed, which I think everything is related to making that not happen, and it just maybe people don't go to that stage of maturity, then like you almost become that person. When you see it, it's going on, but this impact is going on subconsciously, it's subcortically, because actually what it is this was studied when the television first came out and some of this broadcast media. but again, is that the brain, your body is actually, it projects the operation of the nervous system into the image on the screen. It becomes like a decentralized central nervous system so it actually does that, where even after watching it, it can influence your dreams. Even one part subconsciously, you're going to experience yourself as if you're in that media thing you just watched, and that's just your humble little television. That's not even going into all these other aspects and other types of arrays. So you can look at like phase array signal, formats where you have different sort of towers bringing frequency, which is going to be like our 5G, but it's like phase array technology. We can tie this into electromagnetic frequency, psychotronic driving, all that. But really, it is. You're exactly right. But for me, say for myself, like I had to, find that was extant in myself, even though I don't even watch that stuff. You have to go into your own mind. You have to be able to do that. You can maybe shatter it, but I think it really affects people, and you can just notice it in so many ways that are very subtle. Like, even people references to TV shows. Used to, I was a kid, people would always like imitate actors, but you can see how behavior is so, that behavior, action, perception, how people walk into a store, how people comply with certain things, right? It's there. So anyways, I'm just going to get some water. So I'll be back.
Go for it. Yeah. So we're having a great discussion today with Dr. Hans Utter, and going down some rabbit holes about music and culture and programming. And really this, again, I would call it immersive, deep immersive, I don't want to use the word programming. It's bigger than programming. Like it's a bigger, it's almost like a ritual. Like it is a program ritual or ritual program. And we're still in it. It's just, they've changed the program, and they've changed the script, and they've changed the soundtrack, and they've changed the narrative, right? But we're still in this immersive environment. And so if you go back to the 60s, what is it like? Love is all you need, right? Love is all you need. That was the mantra of the 60s. And what's the mantra now? The mantra now is you're racist. Right. Everything is inherently racist. And it's part of the same continuum. It is part of the same continuum. It is part of the same script. It is part of the same programmers that programmed what happened during the 1960s. And now, so the drugs of the 1960s were about expansion, right? Open your mind. Tune in, turn on, tune in, drop out, right? Turn on, tune in, drop out. So what are the drugs of choice now? Well, they're not even a choice, but we have things like fentanyl, methamphetamine, right? So there's always a prescription for the times. And so while you're getting your water, Hans, I was just talking about how, the 60s were part of this kind of ritual operation, and an immersive one. And we're still in one. Right? We're in a ritual operation now, and the narrative has changed. The script has changed. The drugs have changed. The music and the soundtrack has changed, but it's the same continuum in a lot of ways. And this is where I think people really need to pay attention.
Yeah. And one thing, there's a lot in here, because it is, there's a lot that's interconnected, and the thing is that it's easy to just focus on one aspect and be that what I mean, like there's just so much material when you look into this. But the ritual, the ritual operation, this there's a lot of these aspects that have been ongoing. I would say probably the inception, the beginning late Victorian starts to creep in, right?
Spiritualism becomes a big thing during the Victorian
There's a
era.
very powerful and active, occult. They had international bodies of these like sort of satanic churches, very powerful. And this was in the 1880s, 1890s, or, very, large scale, like fin de siècle, you know what I mean? Like, have like Gustav Klimt, like Vienna. So this occult stuff was very developed, and they actually talked about plans for, either subjugation of humanity to control the planet, or just wipe everyone out, but using things like music and these types of rituals. This is anyways, that's a bit of a tangent, but the ritual aspect, it ties into the the whole encoding of life experience, right? So you have this underpinning for Western civilization, which is really the Christian church serving, whatever the flaws and whatever it may be. For example, you have all the ethnic neighborhoods, right, that are connected, Catholic, this and that, in the United States, and those were all part of the civil rights era, was to destroy the inner cities, right? With get into that, but it was not just like white flight. It was like, no, this was like people are looting and doing this, and they're not being enforced by the police, and they're breaking in your house. But anyways, the aspect of this, the ritual aspect, is it has like the basic components of a ritual are initiation, separation, and return, right? And so there can be other stages, but these are the primary. Separation, initiation, return. So separation, a ritual, it takes you out of your normal space, right? Whether it's a graduation ceremony, that's a ritual. You're getting married, but you're walking onto sort of a stage, or a temple, or whatever it may be, right? So that the ritual, and rituals of initiation, rites of passage, and that's one of the things that's missing, right? From you can see, in the WIMP, the 70s, not talking about you, of course, but I mean, a lot of you see the men, this Dr. Spock, of course, coincidentally, don't scold your children. The kid is like hitting the guy in the face, father in the face, and peeing on him, and you're like, okay, son. And it, what I mean? So and then you have the stuff that was done in Germany with really bad, that gets into, very graphic, disgusting things. I won't mention that.
So, okay. So I want to jump in here because we're on a little bit of a magic carpet ride. And I was thinking about this before the show. I think it's a good time to insert this, because you're talking about ritual and Benjamin Spock and don't hit your kid, and, raising a kind of a generation of entitled and soft people. Right. Okay. This ties into Altamont. And I was thinking about this, right? Because you and Jan were talking about the guy that got killed, and I'm listening. I'm like, it's Meredith Hunter, right?
Yeah, I know the name, but
no. But what you did is that he was wearing a green jacket, and that's the green thing that you picked up on, because
he's a green man. That's that's an archetypal image. Not his name was Green, but the Green Man.
But you remembered the green part. You remember that stuck into your head. So I started to think about this. Okay, well, let's look at the name Meredith Hunter. Mm-hmm. Right? The name Hunter in and of itself is an interesting name, right? What does a hunter do? A hunter is self-sufficient, right? A hunter goes out and, finds game and, takes down a bear or deer or whatever, right? And brings it back to the group. Hunter is part of the hunter-gatherer kind of ideology, the individual, okay? Look at the name Meredith. Mare is the sea, right? It's the ocean. And then you have death in there. So you have this kind of the slaughter, right? The ritual slaughter of this individual who represents this idea of the hunter-gatherer. He happens to be black, by the way. That's the other part of it, right? He's black. So that's another piece of the ritual. And the mare death is like the age of Pisces, right? Because you have Pisces, which is the sea, and death. So what do we think of the age of Pisces? We think of like the ritual sacrifice of Jesus, right? So this Meredith Hunter thing is really interesting at Altamont because it's like they're making this ritual sacrifice of this guy who represents this idea of the hunter and the predator, not the predator not in a bad sense, although you could probably make this weird kind of assignation because he's black, he's predatorial, which is not true, right? But predator in the sense that you would stalk game. And then what comes after that, right? I think a lot of the things that you're talking about, and you see the demasculinization. And I'm not saying that these two things are completely linked, but in the world that we're talking about, we have to talk about it.
Well, so I'll try to be a little bit precise here. So to understand this point that, so you have the removal of, say, this Christian aspect, right? Which very important for, you can look at the United States. I mean, the country, it used to be a pretty nice place, right? I mean, it does instill.
It's an organizing principle, and there's order. This is
organized principle with order, discipline, and meaning. You have a meaning, whether or not you can move beyond it, you can go here or there, but it's there, and then another thing I mentioned, like the man used to be, that authority of the father was sacrosanct. You know what I mean? And that being destabilized, what happens? You now have, and many, many other things. Okay, we can go on and on. But as you remove the edifice, the foundational aspects that give most people the meaning in their lives, right? Not the existential philosophers that are, whatever, but just your average person or anybody. This security is gone, and also this ritual space is gone. In a certain way, it's open. And now I'm scientific. Now you come in and plug in people will accept new things. They don't have that, you don't have that strength of inner identity, right? I mean, you know what I mean? Like the Al-Qaeda, operative terrorists, they always say like, oh, they have to torture them. Well, those people are actually very clear in who they are and what they believe. And you know what I mean? You can disagree with that, but I think in the West, really having that sense of strong identity, but not created or constructed, but almost like inherent. Anyways, so the ritual aspect of that, like for example, the ritual murder at Altamont, as you mentioned. So you have the sacrifice of, you're also sacrificing the hopes and dreams of the idealistic generation of love, mm-hmm. right? Yeah. And that's the aspect of it, that it's, and I like what we said about Meredith, and that's also kind of like a female name. And I know people have said, "Oh, he didn't really die." I don't, but of course you have Hell's Angels, right? You have all these contradictions. You have this black and white juxtaposition, which is actually like the checkerboard, which is like the Masonic checkerboard. And this is how you can, when you talk about ritual, in a sense, steps out of time, right? It steps out of linear time. It's sort of raised above. The ritual can exist, ritual can exist for 1,000 years and be the same every time. You know what I mean? So certainly a ritual is, but the chessboard, if you look at, if you just say we take, the Beatles coming out in America, the Kennedy assassination, this, that, Manson or whatever we're talking about. And then you can see these grids, symbolic arrays, that these relate to the trauma tier. And if you look at it outside of time, right, you're looking at spatial temporal relationships atemporally in a ritual space, separation, initiation, and return, right? So that's, the definition of a ritual. But so the ritual process, so the separation, again, it's pulling you, like separation can even be, when you're, an Aboriginal, they drop you in the wilderness and you're naked, you have to survive. If you lose your identity of, well, I don't believe in God anymore. If you're 13 years old or 10, or I saw this, you know what I mean? I'm not saying believe or don't believe in God, but I'm saying like that is like a separation. Or my father is an asshole, or my father, why doesn't my father tell me what I need to do instead of just letting me run rampant? You know what I mean? Even that's subconscious, right? There's a love that comes from authority. But imagine that space. And then in that space of separation, you watch a cartoon, you watch the monkeys. You're being initiated. You're going through a trauma. It also creates a separation, right? So the separation is like a trauma process. The initiatory, all these have many components. Initiation, and in return is your reintegration with, as a transformed person, back into society, right? Back into yourself, which, and that's what, like, Altamont, and rituals can also be negative rituals, right? So it's a sacrifice of the idealism of the 60s, right? And then
absolutely, it's like it's over. Operation's over. We're shutting it down.
Buttons pushed. All the LSD is going to be laced with really nasty stuff. There's going to be the hard drugs. You know, a lot of messed up people, man. You know what I mean? I've heard. At least I wasn't there, but I mean, it's like a lot of people, you know, in town, right? There was like a lot of residue and debris, and people got into the hard drugs also, and that's now we're back. We had ecstasy. Now we're back to what you're saying. We're cycling back into the hard drugs. You know, much worse. You got meth. You know, the demonic porthole of meth and fentanyl. I mean, these things kill people by the.
You know, so the 60s starts off with the kill king ritual of Kennedy, right? That's the big trauma that it initiates people. That's the separation. That is the separation that I think you're talking about. 11/22, 33 day, right?
Yep.
Separation.
Yep.
And then the part that I think is it's linked to Kennedy, but people don't really realize how it's linked to Kennedy, is the impeachment of Richard Nixon. Because there's this whole idea through the 60s where they create this generation gap. They keep talking about the generation gap and this whole thing around the father and, you know, issues with the father. And they're pissed off because somebody killed Kennedy, who's like this, you know, kind of mythological father of the country. And so they've got to kill the father. You know, there's this underlying sort of bloodlust. And even with Morrison in the end, right? This is the soundtrack. You've got to kill the father. And the father is Richard Nixon. And they ritually sacrifice Nixon by impeaching him. Okay. And that's the bookend for the whole Kennedy thing, right? And then once you get into the other side of Nixon, you're in a different world, and that generation and that group has achieved what they set out to do, which is kill the father. And of course, you have Woodard and Bernstein, who are instrumental in that, you know, that experience. And it's also, in my estimation, the death of journalism, right? Because they go out, they get the Moby Dick of their lifetime. And then after that, journalism really becomes more like propaganda. And that's a whole other kind of tale to this story. But it's an important one, because I think Nixon is this bookend to that time as well.
Well, yeah, and it's so interesting because you look, well, what we could see, right, are these inner, just to connect this, right? Nixon, the political aspect, these things are also part of that background, right? You know, like All the King's Men, right? This whole thing, these brave investigative journalists. Well, I mean, one thing was Nixon was way better. He's like, you know, he did a lot, like, for environment. He actually was not that bad of a president. In fact, he did a lot of positive things, but he definitely, stepped on some toes. So the whole Watergate thing, compared to some of these other scandals, is nothing.
It's mice nuts. It's mice nuts.
What the Clintons got into, man. You know, meet me and Mina. You know what I mean? I mean, come on. I mean,
it's mice nuts. And I remember seeing an interview on William F. Buckley, and it was this Italian guy, and he had been involved in the Italian Parliament, but also journalism, and he was kind of moving into this EU space, right? And Buckley talked about Nixon, and he said that would never have happened in Europe. Like they would have looked at sort of this idea that if you do this, you are going to ruin the fucking country, right? You are going to demoralize your people. And he said that would never have happened in Europe. And he kind of looked down on that. And I thought that was really interesting, because from an international perspective, we don't know what that looks like. And he was clear. He said, look, that was ridiculous. You know, what you did with Nixon was the damage that you did with Nixon far outweighed the theoretical crime that he had committed.
Well, absolutely, because this is the fact that, and then even going back where we started, like talking about Hendrix, like just well, in this that there is in our individual lives, right? You could say there is an archetypal dimension, right? So like the king kill ritual, right? There are aspects, and some of these can be even, there's almost like energetic forms. I just small tangent. I was out up in the Himalayas. I lived out in the Himalayas for about a year, and I'd be in places where there's no written language. I have no book. I have nothing, but yet I could almost feel this like living information current that was alive, even though I didn't have access to anything. That's one of the things that's being erased. And part of that is that, so the king kill, the removal of the father, this is a national ritual. Then you have a bookend of Nixon, right? And Nixon, and this, it's like the good father and the bad father, but they're both killed. They're both killed. And it's and that idea for, the body of the nation. I mean, that's not necessarily an abstract, not that I necessarily want to be part of.
Well, one, they celebrated, like they celebrated when they killed Nixon. I mean, it was like the greatest day in, most liberals' lives. This is what they were living for. The ritual killing of their own father. Exactly.
And that's one of the things that Jim Morrison, and I haven't really thought about that. Look at this. You're individualizing. This goes into Schizmogenesis. You're individualizing yourself as the killer, the victim, and the killed too. Because your inner mirror that's one of the most powerful examples of inner mirrors are, with the parents, but especially, the female to the mother, the father, son to the father, as seeing like who am I? What am I? You know what I mean? That inner mirror, you become the killer of the father, which is what the 60s was about. Look at the movie The Graduate, Paul Simon.
Dustin Hoffman, right? Dustin Hoffman?
I mean the song.
The soundtrack. Oh, yeah, right. Yeah.
Well, the movie itself, Mrs. Robinson, I'm talking about Paul Simon.
Right, yeah.
The movie itself is kind of forgettable, right? But that song and the images or just even clips from that movie is what lives on, right? But that's sort of an example, right? And also, for example, the weddings, like how many films you see the wedding being disrupted, right? Yeah. People come in and break up the wedding. That's also related to not only the father, but yourself becoming the father, right? So when you kill not the outer father, when you kill your own inner father, you know what I mean? Then you become adrift. Then you can be a perpetual child.
That's
and so anyways, I don't know if that.
No, I think it's, and again, I think it gets back to this idea that what you were talking about with Christianity and this organizing principle and this orthodoxy and order and things that you can kind of build within that structure, including the family. And then when you take the father out, which is symbolic of Nixon or your own father or God the Father, right? This is where this breakdown occurs. And then everything gets kind of, deconstructed and fragmented. And here we are. We are complete. I don't know if you saw the guy that Biden hired to like oversee the nuclear program. Have you seen this guy?
No.
I mean, it's clown show. He's dressed in drag and fishnet stockings, and this is the guy that's in charge of the nuclear power.
And this is nuclear. It's like Buttigieg, right? He's like, I'm on maternity.
I'm telling you, he makes Buttigieg look like Ward Cleaver.
Okay? No, what I'm saying, but Buttigieg is like, the whole infrastructure is shutting down, and this dude is on maternity leave.
You're right, exactly, for kids that they never had. I mean, it's fucking ridiculous.
But
okay, all right. So this is a good tie-in because we're going to wind down here. But this is a really good tie-in. Really good tie-in is when you started the show with Jan and you were talking about Apocalypto. Okay. And I love Apocalypto. It's a brilliant movie. And one of the things that you were talking about as a movie making goes, it's incredible. Like, I don't think there's any CGI in Apocalypto.
No, none.
Right?
It's
That's
real.
and
It's amazing.
Yeah, and you look at those scenes when they're coming into the sort of the decadence of the Mayan city and the temple and everything. It's epic. Like, that is like David Lean epic style filmmaking. Okay. But one of the things that is the subtext of that movie, Apocalypto, is, guess what? The family.
The water of life. It's the end of it with the family in the well. The rain comes.
Right.
Yeah.
And he's on the hero's journey, right? He's on the hero's journey because he wants to get back to his wife and now his 2 kids. And that is his motivating force. That's the most important thing in his universe, is to protect his family. And through that, all these series and sequences of events happen to him in the rainforest that seem to play in his favor, right? Like these strange things that he comes upon that aid him in his ability to defeat these bloodthirsty savages that are after him and then get back to his family. Because that family is the organizing principle. It is his raison d'etre, right, for everything in his life. And I thought to myself when I first saw that, that's really the subtext of the movie. This is what Mel Gibson is talking about.
Well, in that way, it is, it's really, I saw it, first came out, and people have said bad things about the movie. I think it's one of the best. Most of the garbage out there, film, most of it's crap. Even stuff that people say, oh, that's a great classic film, because I had terrible flu for 3 weeks. Couldn't find anything. Apocalypto. I'm like, this is monumental, but
Yep.
it's monumental it has, you look at I never watched crap. I watched the credits. I mean, you look at the whole thousands of people he had involved in that to do that film, but it still has this spirit of life. It's like from the heart, right? That's like a Tarkovsky, Solaris, great, one of my favorite directors. And I was watching Tarkovsky stuff because it's like, can't watch it at least. Oh, I was familiar with Tarkovsky.
Yeah. Well, some people are, yeah.
Yeah, but anyways, but for me, the thing was, I literally felt it was like, this is the whole movie. I experienced it as, our world, right? Like almost we're facing that same situation.
Absolutely.
We are there. And it is that, it's sort of that, the family, it's like the core, your love, the real self, that, you know what I mean? That's not something, it's not, and to find that, and that's your sanctuary. And, and then, but it's through, if you see that, it's through that, that path that the benefits comes, right? So it's not.
Absolutely. It's through the dedication, the commitment, and the love, making that thing the most important thing in his life, in his world, is to get back to them. And as a result of that,
the spiritual magic.
Absolutely. Help. Yes.
Not the other way around.
Exactly. Absolutely. So I just wanted to bring that up because I think it ties into sort of this atomization of the family that we've been talking about, the death of the father, which, by the way, he experiences in the movie. He experiences the death of his father.
Yeah.
And then his commitment and love for the children who will take their place as a father in his world. And I love the film. I think it's great. It's one of my favorite of all time. And I thought we could end on kind of a positive note like that.
Well, absolutely. And that's the beauty. Even like, I don't like chasings that much, but those are epic, amazing. But going into that city, I mean, it's like, that's what is happening to us as a planet, as individuals. And this is the most aspect, is that, like, for example, the 6G, it's supposed to be like this biosynthetic, bio-integrative internet. It feeds off of your negative emotions. It literally thrives off of all these negative things. And it's a lot of people who haven't, you try to heal the relationships that are important,
Yeah.
Because
let me ask you a question. Do you have any children?
I have a son. Yeah.
A son. Okay. Well,
So I just got a bit. I got a bit emotional there because I lost my younger brother, and actually from to overdose, and it was he's a big, really important in my life, and so it's really important, that at least you have pure. You can live with purity. I think that's so important. But live from the heart. I'm thinking, open your heart. You have to open, and it's very important to clear the baggage and all these things that you generate suffering through, like anger, or people get patterns. It's patterns are there. Some of these are not your own, and sometimes you're dealing with people that are caught. But there's so much you can release, and you don't have to carry that, and you can clear. And it may be painful, and you may not be as strong as you think, and it may be more insecure. But guess what? Life is insecure right now, right? But that's the thing. I mean, I think that's and ultimately all these demonic arrays of these I mean, if it's going to triumph, then it doesn't matter anyways. But I don't. I think that now's the time to do that, and there's so much blessing and sanctuary available, but it doesn't have to come from looking out. It comes from looking in, but with the people and people you're directly connected with, right? Not just thinking about something, but anyways. I think that's a great thing, and thank you for bringing that up, because I mean, to me, it really is like a way to say. I mean, I think there's truth in that. I'll say that straight up. I think that is, and maybe it won't necessarily be specifically the family, but it's that core of that kind of love that we all know what it is, even though we maybe rarely, because it's also a sacrifice. You become, in a certain way, you're sacrificing. But in this case, you're sacrificing the lower aspect of yourself.
Right.
You're not harvesting. You're not allowing your higher self to be energy harvested, which is a lot of what this stuff is about. But okay, I'll leave it there. It's 3 or 2 o'clock here.
Yeah,
So
yeah. Hans, I knew this would be a great interview, and because when I saw you on Jan, I'm like, I like this guy. He's smart. He connects a lot of dots. He's got a music background. So when Steve, brought you up as a possible guest, I was psyched. And then, synchronistically, I saw the interview you did with Jan on Monday. So I really want to thank you for being here today.
Hey, it was fantastic. I really enjoyed it. Yeah. So hopefully, do it again.
I'd love to have you back. And if you have like another book coming out, or you just want to hang out and talk some more about, because I could go on forever about a lot of this shit. So you're welcome here anytime.
Well, no, it was fun. I have material, and this and that, but Schizmogenesis. But I thought it was just great, just diving into a topic, and I thought we covered a lot of interesting ground. It was really fun with, it's more of a dialogue. Because a lot of times I do stuff as more like kind of a presentation. So this was I really enjoyed that, and I think there's a lot to uncover. So fantastic, man. I really appreciate it. And
let's give people another peek at your website, which you're probably going to be doing some different things with, but let's do it again.
That's on the list. And I also have a WordPress, mind control music at wordpress.com. And I've got like CDs for sale.
So you have you got some music there too. Huh? Okay.
Yeah, it should be. Yeah, I've got it. Yeah, it should be for sale.
Let's just give people another glance at your website before we get on out of here.
There's an album on Spotify. If that's through this label, but it's called Avalon and Tara. It's like actually me and my wife singing, but it's music to sleep by. So
okay, cool, very good, excellent. Hans, keep up the good work, and we'll see you soon, one of these days.
All right, Robert.
All right, take good care.
All right, man.
Okay.
Last question. Are you into astrology, by the way?
Seems like that's the other hat I wear, and so I do a lot of work with like astrological cycles, generations. I also do individual work too.
Oh no, that would have if I'd known that, I really would have liked to kind of go into that with you, because I think that's a really
let's get you on again, man. We'll do a deep dive.
Okay. All right, man.
Well, take care, brother. Bye for now. Okay, that was Dr. Hans Utter. Great show. Really, really great show. And I look forward to having him back. He feels like he's going to be somebody who's going to be on the show on a frequent basis. So, Friday FARcast, another one in the books on 2/11, and a really, really good one. So, a couple of things I want to kind of end on here. One of which is a personal story, semi-personal, personal to me in terms of the person who told me the story. I'm going to tell you that story. And I'm going to be on with Giuseppe today on Twitch at 5 p.m. So I think it's Perfect Triangle on Twitch with Giuseppe. I don't think Dave Scorpio's on. I think he has somebody else. I didn't recognize his name. But I'll be on there for 2 hours, and we're going to talk about some of the stuff around Tartaria and some of the astrological stuff around Tartaria that I've played around with. And then I'm going to bring up the Janus ritual, which we are now out of, right? And if you have been following the stuff that I've been talking about, I said that in January we would come out of the Janus ritual, and that would mean the dropping of the masks. The masks would come off, and we've seen that now. So the Janus ritual, which has there, one of the aspects of the Janus ritual is war. It happens during wartime, and we have been in a war, and we're still kind of in the war, but it's different. The war is on us, the people of the United States of America, and the people of the West in a lot of ways. So we have been in that war space. Part of the Janus ritual. It's over now, at least this phase. And the idea is that people are changed on the other side, and people are changed genetically, biologically. They are changed. And so I'm going to talk about that on Giuseppe's show today as well. All right. Here's the story. It's anecdotal, and I want to share it with you. And I hope the person I'm referencing here doesn't mind this. I'm not going to mention their name. But I got a call today from a dear friend of mine, and she told me something that blew my mind. And what she told me was that she had ended a relationship with somebody whom she had been in for a while, and in my mind, clearly not a healthy relationship. And for reasons I'm not going to get into. But she ended that relationship. And not only did she end that unhealthy relationship, reclaimed her life, synchronously, her long-term and challenged relationship with her daughter pivots, changes. Everything in her daughter's life becomes an upgrade, total upgrade. Now, this is a family that doesn't believe in, the protocols of the pandemic, right? So just fill in the blanks. Everything you need to do theoretically, especially the money shot, don't believe in it. I'm not going to practice it. So the family winds up, again, synchronistically, almost like magic and divine timing, moves out of Pennsylvania, where they have much more rules, strictures, and limitations, and they relocate to Idaho. And everything happens. Like it all happens. Both parents get jobs and better jobs than the ones that they had. And like they said to my friend, it's incredible. Everybody's nice here. Not that there aren't nice people in Pennsylvania. There are. But it's a different vibe. I mean, it's clearly a different vibe. So here's a person made a significant change, finally ending a relationship that didn't work for her. It should have ended a while ago. And she knows that. And we talked about it, but that, it is what it is, right? And then everything changes. The most difficult relationship besides the one that she was trying to leave was with her daughter. And that pivots and heals. So I'm sharing this with you because this gets back to, in some ways, what Hans and I were talking about at the end of the show, which is the basis of the movie Apocalypto, and the thing that the main character commits to and is more important than anything to him is that thing. Right. And it's that thing that's this connection between his wife and his two children, one that's born while he's away, trying to, get away from the clutches of the dark Mayan priests under the spell of the demonic entities that were running that culture. So it's the same thing. Like once you commit to something, right? Once you commit to something, then the commitment starts to work with you. That's the way it works. That's how it happens. I'll share you another thing, another little tidbit. Okay. So one of her, I think it's either her son-in-law or her son. I can't remember which. One of the two. He had a number of doctors, people that he knew, physicians, privately come up to him and say, don't get it. Okay. Now they can't come out and say that. They'll lose their license, lose their practice, but just to let you know, there are doctors who privately tell people that they know, they love, maybe, who knows? I don't know where they are in terms of being complicit. Maybe they're not, actually engaged in the administration of it, right? But they told him, don't get it. So that knowledge is out there. And sometimes we tend to think of, well, the medical world is just this monolithic, Borg-like entity. It's not. Trust me, there are people in that world that know what's going on. It's very hard for them to figure out how to untangle themselves from this mess that they're in. And that's just from their professional perspective. I'm not even talking about how they have to deal with that on a personal perspective, right? Emotionally, philosophically, spiritually. Like, you're one of those physicians, and you're advising people privately. What do you think is going on inside of you? How do you reconcile these things? It's got to be difficult. And I'm not trying to give them a pass, but I am trying to tell you that there are people that are in that game. They're aware. They're probably doing the best they can. And they're probably having to really deal with like the internal processes of this stuff that you and I probably couldn't even imagine. So I hope that we get more of those people who can flip the switch and turn some corners. And who knows, maybe it's too late, maybe because of the Janus ritual, the game is over. But, I still think that there's a lot of encouragement to make this happen. And of course, the idea is to continue to do this and to be able to mainstream mRNA into the regular, its schedule. And if that's the case, then they can make a much longer kind of, that's what I'm looking for, a much longer case, I guess, for not taking it. All right. Thanks for being here. Of course, I'll be back on Sunday night over on Sunday Night Astro Live. And today at 5 p.m. on Twitch with Giuseppe and the Perfect Triangle. Until then, use your head in order to discern what's real, your heart to discern what's possible. Once again, thanks to Dr. Hans Utter for being here, and for Steve Thor by the Door for setting it up. Next Friday, the return of Hattie McCoskey. That should be